I'd say all roads lead back to that particular property and its current situation relative to the competition in the market. Because this is if you are charging for parking, then there needs to be a demand, right? Supply demand. There needs to be demand for it. And you also need to be within the market parameters, or you need to be competitive with the rest of the market.
Okay.
Therefore, the first thing I would look at is the current parking situation at the property. I love using the extreme examples to make the point. If you have 100 residents and you have 400 parking spots, or 100 units and you have 400 parking spots, then you're probably going to be hard pressed to charge residents for it. So you need to look at what type of demand and how special is it to be able to have your own parking spot. Now let's assume that it's a typical apartment community where you have 2 spaces for every 1 unit, because that's typically the ratio, that, at least that I've come across. Now in new development, they're looking to decrease that because it's just not needed. People don't drive as much if they're in New York City, or if they are in a new development that's most likely close to a bunch of retail and so bars and things like that. But let's just assume, typical scenario, for every unit you have 2 parking spots. Well, if that's the case, then some things I would look at doing is, one, a resident recognition program for long-standing residents. Because what your goal, or what your question, Devin, is ultimately getting at is, can I make more money at the property by can I make more money at the property through the parking situation in some way? So instead of looking at it, can I charge for parking spots, look at what is your number one expense at the property, and it might be tenant turnover. So if you can increase resident retention by giving residents a prime parking spot, and that is very convenient for them. They get their groceries and they can just scoot right into their apartment versus having to go around all these cars and over the curb and stuff. If that increases resident retention, then you now no longer have move-out costs, advertising, marketing costs to get the new resident in there, tenant turnover costs. So it's likely that the $3,000 that it would cost to turn over the unit all in is a greater amount of money than charging $25 for your parking spot in the prime location. So look at it in multiple angles, not just can I charge for the spot. Look at it from a resident retention standpoint and see if that would actually make more sense, if that can increase resident retention. But to answer your question directly answer your question about my experience charging multifamily residents, well, we do the approach I just mentioned. We built carports, and we are building carports. The advantage to building carports versus just charging for a prime spot in front of someone's building is, well, it increases the value of that parking spot, assuming that the area is hit with either really bright and hot sun, which Texas is, a lot of hot sun, wind in the north, snow in Texas, hail. So you got a lot of reasons why you want a carport in certain cities, and we charge $30, $35 depending on the unit, or depending on the property, to do that, and we make 20-25% return on those. So tends to be a good investment. To give you an example of how many we build on a property, we're planning on building 50 on a 250 unit property, roughly 250 unit property. So that gives you an idea of how many we build.
1 per 5 units.
Yes, exactly, 1 per every 5 units. So we're not building for every parking spot. We're building selectively in certain areas where it makes sense.
Yeah, you made a really good point. I never even thought about it that way before. But when you're kind of addressing this specific question of should you charge for parking, or kind of what we're going to do next, which is about ways to things that you can do to add increase your profits. Making sure that if you're doing something, you may be adding more money on one hand, but you might be that you charging for that might affect your tenant retention, or someone might not want to live there because I can get free parking over here, why would I pay for parking here? Just kind of just thinking about, okay, if I'm going to do something here, will that it's not going to happen just in a vacuum. It's going to potentially affect something else, and if you're just kind of thinking about that before you kind of make that decision is a really good point.
Yeah, that's what I try to do with most things. If it's how can we make money on this, well, is there a larger item that we can address to ultimately solve what we're really trying to solve for, which in this case Devin's talking about just having a better NOI at the property. And one of the things that I always keep in mind is, and this is relevant but not directly related, is our number one expense would be taxes. As entrepreneurs and real estate investors, number one expense, taxes. And so often we do all the work on the income of the property, the expenses of the property, but then from our overall tax standpoint, we don't have the right CPAs and tax analysts to identify how can we mitigate our number one largest expense, taxes.
Yeah.
So.
And to put things in perspective about taxes, I was looking at my I was looking at my cash flow calculator the other day to update some things because some of our expenses were lower than what I assumed them to be, and just the property taxes alone are 25% of our rents that we come in. I mean, that's just the property tax. That's not like the potential taxes you pay on the income at the end of the year. I wish there was a way that you could address that, but I think there's a couple things you can do, but not really. You guys gotta kind of bite the bullet on that.
Cost segregation.
Yeah, cost segregation.
Will help with that for sure.
Yeah. I might have it, that's so high. It seems like it's so high. I guess
and you can protest too. Yeah, cost segregation will just lower your tax basis in general for what you pay or what you realize. But then the actual assessment itself, you could protest depending on where you're at. And we actually did an episode with someone who talked about the appeal process and how to protest.
Yeah, I remember listening to that one.